Hey everyone, this is Erin from AaronsAudioCorner.com, and today I'm going to go through a little bit of a preemptive first take, first impressions, and a miniature teardown of the Revel F226Be loudspeaker. Well, first off, as you may notice, this is a three-way speaker, and for those who don't know, what that means is the speaker's sound is divided up over essentially three components, if you will. One of them being the tweeter, the other being a mid-range, and the other third one being the mid-bass. So in this case, you have a three-way speaker, the tweeter consisting of the 1-inch dome beryllium tweeter, beryllium as in don't touch it or you will get poisoned. The second speaker is the mid-range, and that is a 5¼ inch mid-range. And then the bottom two speakers down here make up the third portion of the three-way, and those are the mid-bass speakers. They are 6½ inch mid-woofers. The crossover region between the tweeter to the mid-range is 2.1 kilohertz, and the crossover region between the mid-range and the mid-bass units is 260 hertz. And there is a port on the bottom. The speaker stands at about 41 inches tall, give or take, about 10 inches wide on the front, and then about 13 inches deep. So it's not a very huge loudspeaker, but it also is not a small one. This speaker does come with a magnetic grill. Kind of just pops on like so, and that's it. Very fancy, but I have to say that I am in love with this black and white contrast. Very similar to the Bacart S400 that I received earlier, or a couple months ago for testing. I got a white cabinet with black speakers, and I really love the white against the black contrast of a speaker. I know a lot of people don't care for that kind of color range, but personally I do. I think it looks just awesome. When I set these up in my living room last night just to kind of get a feel for the size of them in that space, my wife came by and she commented on them, and she actually liked the white grills because they do match our bookshelves, which I thought, maybe for Christmas I'll get her some of these speakers, but I'm probably not gonna be able to do that. So, but a guy can dream, right? Aside from that, we've got the weight at about 58 pounds. So these are pretty heavy speakers. Those of you who have children, you're worried about the tip factor. Let's do this. Let's call it the tip test. T squared. I'm gonna copyright AaronsAudioCorner.com. The T squared tip factor. No, tip test. TF. I'm already messing this up. I'm rolling with it. I know some of you folks out there might be concerned about the speaker falling over. I know when I had some tower speakers back in the day, I was always worried that somebody's going to walk by them or my child was going to somehow knock them over. So that was one reason why I actually got away from the tower speakers and I just went back to the television speakers. So for those of you who are concerned about them tipping over, note that I don't have the spikes that these are supposed to come with. They weren't sent to me, or if they were, I haven't found them yet. So right now I've got them just set up on bare carpet on the flat bottom. And if I do what I'm going to call the tip test. It's all good. So I'm trying to knock these over, and they're actually rocking back and forth, and they're staying up well. So no issues there as far as I'm concerned. The good thing about these speakers is that they're relatively sensitive. They're 90 dB at 2.83 volts, 1 meter. Most speakers are usually around the 87 to 88, 89 region, especially ones like bookshelves or smaller monitors. They're in the 85 to 86 dB region. The reason for that is they only typically use a single mid-woofer. And in this case, the addition of the mid-woofer, I'm assuming, gives it the ability to bump up that sensitivity to a higher region because they're able to account for baffle step loss by adding the secondary woofer. Now, for those of you who don't know what baffle step loss is, that just means that if you put a speaker on a wall, everything that speaker plays, at least within a certain frequency range, is going to be radiated forward and also reinforced by the wall behind it. But when you take the speaker off a wall and move it into free space, all the radiation that would have been reinforced by the wall is no longer there, so it loses output. The same effect happens when you put a speaker on a baffle. Let's say you have a typical 6½ inch mid-woofer, just the drive unit, something like that, and you got it attached to a baffle. If the speaker sensitivity rated on that baffle is 88 dB and you take that speaker off that baffle, you're going to be closer to the 82, 83 dB region because you've lost a whole lot of reinforcement from that wall. And again, same thing happens with a speaker like this or a bookshelf. But when you add another speaker or another drive unit to the mix, then that increases the sensitivity again. So it basically makes up for the loss of the baffle. So let's talk about the looks of the speaker. One of the first things that people are going to notice, aside from its really nice, cool contrast, is the tweeter. So the tweeter is a 1-inch dome tweeter, and it's mounted into a waveguide. Now that waveguide is going to help disperse sound in a particular pattern horizontally and vertically. But the shape of the waveguide being more oval is going to make the vertical pattern different than the horizontal pattern. And when I get to the testing portion, we'll talk more about that and what that actually results in. But just for now, that's why it's different long ways than it is tall ways, because they want to actually change the radiation pattern in a certain way. And thus they came up with this design. Now let's look at the mid-range. The first thing I noticed about this speaker that caught my eye was the fact that the mid-range surround is a whole lot different than the woofer's surround. To you DIY guys, you all know that most of the time when a manufacturer produces a driver in different sizes, so a 4-inch, a 6-inch, a 7-inch, most of the time it's like they're a carbon copy, they're just reduced in size or increased in size. That means that the surround looks the same, the spider looks the same, everything it looks the same. It's like they just shrunk it. Now I'm certain that the parameters have changed, we all know they do, but as far as cosmetics go, they basically look the same. This is the first mid-range that I've seen that looks just like its woofer counterpart that actually has a reduced surround. Now that doesn't mean that nobody else does this, but it's the first thing that caught my eye. I'm assuming, based on my experience with concentric drive units, or coaxials as most people call them, that some of the reason this design on the surround is different has something to do with the tweeter. I'm going to guess they wanted a smaller profile on the mid-range itself to keep any kind of I guess reflections from the tweeter coming out, hitting that, and then resulting in an odd frequency response. I don't know that that's the case, and that may not be the case at all, but I just kind of have that hunch that it's got to have something to do with that too. I'm sure that it also has something to do with the linearity of the suspension itself. So the suspension linearity is controlled by the spider and the surround. And from my understanding, if you broke that down into percentages, the linearity of the suspension itself would be 80% spider, 20% surround. That's kind of a rough swag at it. So the fact that it's different and the fact that it doesn't need to cover mid-bass frequencies make me think that there's another reason that they changed the profile of the surround there. I would actually be curious to know what the engineering reasons for that are, because to me it doesn't seem to make sense that you would change the surround if there's no real legitimate improvement. You know, so I'd be curious to know why they did that. There's got to be a reason, right? And then we move on to the 6.5-inch woofers, which look like 6.5-inch woofers. They don't jump out at me. I don't notice anything abnormal or particularly interesting about them. They look like woofers to me. And then I'm going to flip it around to the back real fast. And you can see these are dual gold-plated binding posts with a little link between, which means that if you wanted to bi-amp the speakers, you actually could. You would just remove this link and provide amplification for the woofer section as well as for the high frequency section. But if you don't, you just keep the link in, you use a single pair or a single channel from an amplifier for each speaker, and then you just back to a standard 2-channel stereo setup. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully the pictures and this video will kind of give you a little bit more information about this speaker. I am legitimately Jesse Spano level excited about these. And if you don't know what I mean, here we go.
I'm so excited!
See what I mean? I'm so excited. But yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit all that stuff, and I'll talk to you later. Peace out.